Welcome to my method helper video. This video is going to help you write the best method section for your project. So let's get started. By now, you've already completed 2 assignments and gotten feedback on those 2 assignments. The goal of those 2 assignments is for you to have already designed the skeleton of a project that you can do for this class and found a little bit of research already on that topic. At least 4 articles, and maybe when you were looking for those 4, you've found some others as well. Now the next step is to write the method section. We write the method section before the literature review because sometimes we change our procedure or our variables when we write our methods, and those changes affect the concepts that's discussed in the literature review. This is true in real life as well. I write a skeletal method and use that to complete the IRB before I write a full literature review for my article. But that doesn't mean that I haven't read anything. The key step of research is to always make sure that you read first, because reading will help me understand what do we know, what do we not know, how are people manipulating these variables, how people are measuring these variables, and those will help give me some ideas. So for our example, I've created a fake experiment that would not fit for our class, and that way nobody can use that design in their papers, but is still a great way of showing you how to write a good methods project. So the study that I've designed is, I'm interested in which coping methods most dramatically affect people's stress levels. And I've decided I'm going to have 2 groups. One group is going to get cookies, and one group is going to do meditation. And I'm going to give both groups a stress measure to see which group had less stress after they either ate cookies or did meditation. Again, this project wouldn't work for our class because remember, your projects have to be on either cyber psychology or human sexuality, and that you're not allowed to give people substances or food. But this is a great way of thinking about your projects. Many of your projects probably have a design similar to this, where you have 2 separate groups that are getting different things, and then you're measuring something at the end. So if we look at our method section, the first thing that it wants is an APA title page. So here's Microsoft Word, and it's very easy to start a title page. I just double click the header area, I click different first page, then we want to insert a page number all the way to the right. We type running head and some kind of shortened title. And then we hit tab twice. I also have to remember to put all of this in the right font, of course, which is Times New Roman 12-point font. There's our running head. Then we need our full title, which for this fake project is going to be we have our title, we have our name, and we have our university. Again, all of this needs to be in the correct font. It needs to be centered, and we want to make sure we correct our spelling errors. Then I'm just going to insert a page break to get to page 2. Notice the running head has disappeared. That's because I clicked that different first page button. And now it's time to put everything that was after the colon back in the running head. Once I do that and change the font, then every page after that will have the correct running head. For the method section, you don't need an abstract. You'll be writing that towards the end of the project. So what you need is just to start the page with the correct subheading. APA has specific rules about headings. Your first level heading is centered, bold, and upper and lower case. And your second level are left align, bold, upper, and lower case. For this, the method section, you pretty much only need levels 1 and 2. The first will be method, and again it needs to be bolded, and then the first subsection is participant. I want to make sure though that I turn the bolding off when I actually get to my paragraph. If we go back to our rubric, you'll see that the questions that I need to answer are: who will represent your population, what's your target population, what are the demographic requirements for your study, and particularly how many will you recruit and why. You must support the number of participants you are recruiting with other published studies. So let's first talk about accessible and target populations. As a college student here at Kennesaw, you only really have the accessibility of your fellow students or people who are in the Kennesaw area. So you want to make sure that if that's where your sample is coming from, that you tell me what your target population is and that you make it narrow. For this study, if I'm just a college student, these are also going to be college students. So my sample will be college students from KSU, my accessible sample is college students from KSU, and my target then is college students, and not just young adults as a whole. Because again, college students aren't a perfect alignment with young adults. There are plenty of young adults who don't go to college. I want to start with telling you about the target population and then the accessible population from which the sample will be drawn. Notice that college students and college students are aligned in such a way where this will not be a biased sample. There is a writing issue though here. This is not double spaced. So I go up to our paragraph menu and notice how it's doing all sorts of weird stuff. We want these first two numbers to be 0 so that there's 0 before and after, and we want our line spacing to be at double. Now the next piece is I need to figure out how many people are going to be in my study. This is not a number that you draw out of the air. There are two ways to support a sample size. The first is to do a power analysis to find out what is the minimum number of humans that's required for your statistical test. But that's just a minimum. You would always want to record more than that. A much easier and more widely used way is to look at articles that have been published on your topic. If the people who are publishing on your topic are recruiting 5,000 and 6,000 and you recruit 50, even if that's enough to run your statistical test, they're not going to take you seriously because they're recruiting way more people than you are. So you want to look for articles that are either on your topic or have a similar design as you. And you want to find at least 2 of those articles, average those sample sizes together, and that's how many that you're going to recruit. To try to find my sample size, I've gone to Psych info and I've typed in stress, meditation, and college students. And as I've scrolled down, I found 2 articles that look pretty close to what I'm doing. The first one is one that's comparing 10 and 20-minute practices of meditation. So there's clearly 2 different groups, just like my study. And this one, that's the effects of a brief mindfulness meditation intervention on student stress. So I've looked at both of those, and the participants in one is 74, and the participants in another one is 77. So that means that that's a good sample size for what I'm doing. So I'm going to take 74 and add it to 77, and I'm going to take the average of that, and then I'm going to put in parentheses those 2 articles. As you can see, I've now written that up. Approximately 75 college students will be recruited for this study, and the key phrase here is to be consistent with published literature on stress interventions in college students. And then I've put my 2 articles that I just found at the library in there. This is what supports my sample size. It's also what shows me, your instructor, that you've done the background research and that you didn't just grab a number out of the air, that you recognize that the number of people that are in your study is more important than that. The other questions on my rubric are about demographic requirements, how they will be recruited, and how they will be compensated. So here's what I've written. The participants will be recruited through a convenient sampling method. Again, this shows me that you understand that you don't have access to doing random samples of college students. Remember, to do a random sample, you would have to have a list of everybody that's in the population so that you could randomly draw from that list. You, a college student, do not have access to an entire list of everybody here that's at Kennesaw. So you can't randomly sample. You'll have to use something else. And again, what's most feasible for you as college students is convenient sampling. Flyers will be posted around the campus to recruit for the study, as well as digital advertisements in college-based sites that allow for advertisement postings. All participants must be legal adults over 18 years old and must not be allergic to the ingredients of the cookies and consent to perform meditation practices with their eyes closed to qualify for the study. That's the demographic requirements. Notice that I have not capped off an age, that they're all legal adults and that they have to be college students. Oh wait, I didn't put college students. Let's add that in. All participants must be legal adults and currently enrolled in college. There we go. Must not be allergic and must consent. Notice that I haven't said they need to be college students between the ages of 18 and 25. If you're going to do an age cap and say you're not going to take anybody younger than or older than a certain age, you're going to have to say why. And it needs to be a reason that's consistent with published literature. You cannot tell me that you're going to only recruit people ages 18 to 25 because that's who uses the internet or that's who uses Instagram. You made that up. There are plenty of people who are in their late 20s, early 30s, late 30s who use Instagram. Why are you capping them out of your study? So think of it this way. You can make any decision that you want with your study design, but you have to have a reason for that. And that reason has to be consistent with published literature or because they're based on other findings, not just because you want to. I've also decided that participants will have the option to enter a raffle for 2 $30 Amazon gift cards after they complete their consent forms and that no other compensation will be offered. Remember, your compensation needs to be small enough that it keeps people in the study, but it's not so large that it is coercive. Also, you'll need to make sure that the amount that you're spending on your study is feasible and reasonable. If I was going to give $30 to all 75 of my participants, that's well over $2,000. Well, none of you are going to spend $2,000 of your own pocket money to do this, right? So instead, I've made this a reasonable amount that I could spend. If you have a study design that would actually require some money, all you need to do is type a line somewhere in either your materials or procedure section that you will attempt to get grant funding by seeking a grant from, and then just put the name of any organization that actually gives grants. You don't actually have to go through the process of doing that because, again, this is fake. But what that shows me, what that one sentence shows me, is that you did the math and you realize that this study is really expensive and that expensive studies require grants. This is all I need for my participant section. So I'm going to move on to the next section, which is materials. Again, that subheading is bolded, but all the way over, and then my next paragraph would be indented. The materials subsection should have at least 2 separate paragraphs. The first paragraph is how you are manipulating your IV, and your second paragraph is very specific about your DV. Remember that you're not just listing the things that you would buy, so things like papers or pencils or classrooms or desks or tables do not belong in this section. So the real key is 1 paragraph on how I'm going to manipulate my IV, 1 paragraph on how I'm going to measure my DV. Let's start with how I'm going to manipulate my IV. In my fake study, I'm giving cookies and meditation. Well, I'm going to need to figure out exactly what kind of cookies, and they're going to need to be consistent for everybody because everyone in group 2 needs to have the same kind of cookies. Because if I make it just a variety, that's too many possible confounding variables. Over here in meditation, I'm also going to need to say, well, how long? Who's going to lead it? What type? You need to be so clear that I, your reader, could draw your study on a piece of paper or completely run it myself. So here's my description of group 1. Participants will be randomly assigned to one of 2 groups. Group 1 will receive 2 cookies after completing the consent form. The cookies will be Oreo sandwich cookies, standard, non-thin, non-holiday. Water will also be provided. Once the participant fully consumes the 2 cookies, then they can proceed to the stress measure. So like some of you might be having people play video games. Well, which video game? Who publishes it? What year did it come out? What kind of game is it? Is it a first-person shooter? Is it an MMORPG? Is it a solo adventure? Is it a puzzle game? I need to know all of these things. Because again, you want your reader to get enough details to where they could run the study without you. Here's my description for Group 2. Group 2 will participate in a 15-minute guided meditation. Notice I have a citation here. That's because I have actually found a specific YouTube video that provides a 15-minute guided meditation, and that's exactly the one that I'm going to be using. If I was not using a YouTube video, I would have a sentence in here about who would be leading this. Perhaps I'm going to hire someone to do that. Or perhaps there is a particular script that I am using. That script would also have to be cited. Participants will have an option of sitting on the floor or in a chair, and the room has dim lighting. That is my one paragraph on my manipulation of my IV. Now it's time to move on to my DV. So stress has to be measured. And how do we measure stress? Well, I can take cortisol out of someone's mouth, but that's going to be really complicated. And as an undergrad, that's not really feasible for me to do on my own. So the best way is for me to find a published measure that measures stress. Where do I do that? I start at the library. One of the best ways to find a good measurement for your DV is to read and to look at the articles you've already looked at. How are they measuring their DV? It should be in their materials section. And if they're using that measurement, then it's a good reason for you to use that measurement. So you probably don't have to start completely from scratch. Go look at your other articles. How are they measuring their DV? But if you do have to go completely from scratch, then what you use is the library website. So I've typed in stress and this key phrase, development and validation, because that's usually in the title of any article that develops a new scale. And I can start scrolling through some of these and see that all of these articles are about people developing brand new measures, questionnaires, and scales that have something to do with stress. So it took a little looking, but I did find this one. This is one that I've used before. It's the Depression, Anxiety, and Stress Scales. And notice how the title talks about the construct validity and normative data. So again, that's how I know that they're developing a new measure. And that this is a scale that looks at depression, anxiety, and stress. So I can pull out just the stress subscale. In this article, I'm going to find some really important information that's required in this paragraph I'm writing. I have to come up with how many questions is it? Well, there's 21 because it talks about this being a 21 item test. It also tells me the reliability of the scale so that I can show my reader that this is a reliable scale. It also, in this article, discusses validity, particularly convergent and discriminant validity. So I can quote from here to again show my reader that this is both a reliable and valid scale. So I've completed my paragraph on my DV measure. It says that stress will be measured in the sample with the DAS-21, and I've cited that measure that I found. That the stress subscale has 7 items which are scored on a 4-point scale from 0 to 3, and that total scores for the subscale range between 0 and 21. I then say that the stress subscale has been shown to be reliable, and I put in the Cronenbach alpha that was from the article, and has, quote, been shown to possess adequate construct validity, and I've cited that quote with a page number. Again, your reader would be able to look at this and know why you've picked the measure, which is that it's reliable and valid, and be able to basically map out in their head what kinds of scores to expect from this sample. This is important because at the end of your project, you're going to write a methods and a literature review, and then I'm going to make you a fake Excel data file that you're going to analyze and then put in a mini poster presentation through PowerPoint to send to me. So you need to be clear enough that I can actually make fake data. So without information like this, I can't make you anything. And if I can't make you anything, you can't complete the final project. The next section that's on our rubric is the procedure. It says that it should also be 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph is a step-by-step description of what you plan to do and how long participants will be involved, if you're using any deception, and if so, how and why. The other paragraph needs to really talk more about controlling for your extraneous variables or what limitations you already have in your study. So I have now written my procedure subsection. I've been very clear about the step-by-step portion in this first paragraph of what each participant will be asked to do, whether or not they're in group 1 or group 2. I've also made sure to write this whole paragraph in such a way that while it builds on the other 2 subsections, it is not directly repetitive. I'll be providing a PDF of this paper so that you can read it in more depth. The second paragraph also talks about confounding variables. I have talked about in the first sentence what variables I've specifically tried to control for. Specifically, that participants all receive the same type of cookie or the same type of guided meditation. Oh, there's another spelling error. But I've also outlined other potential confounding variables. These are cookie preferences, experience with meditation, and pre-existing severe stress levels. I have offered that a participant reports to testing the cookies that we're using that they will be excused from the study. The other two I haven't addressed. Perhaps the feedback I'll get from my instructor is either how to do that, or if there's no way to control for that, I will need to bring it up in the limitations section of my final project. Now it's time to move on to the last subsection. As you remember, the last subsection is a proposed analysis subsection. The first part is our hypothesis. The hypothesis I've written is that participants who experience the guided meditation will have lower stress scores than participants who consume cookies. But I want to remember that I'm going to get fake data for this. So I'm going to want to make sure that I do something I know how to do. That is a directional hypothesis, which means it's a one-tailed test. An easier hypothesis maybe for me to analyze at the end of the course would be a two-tailed test. So if I think it'd be easier, I might want to actually put a non-directional hypothesis. I'm going to keep this one because, again, you do have the information on how to do a one-tailed test for this, but keep it in mind that you will have to perform this analysis. And then in the draft phase, I just need 2 sentences about what statistical test you think you're going to run. However, at this point, now that I'm writing, I know exactly what test to run. The design is 2 groups. They are independent of each other, so no one in group 1 can be in group 2, no one in group 2 can be in group 1. So they're 2 independent groups. So it's an independent t-test. So I can actually write the correct answer. But if you don't know, I will be providing you the correct answer. I just want to see some effort on your part. I have now completed my proposed analysis subsection. So my methods draft has a correct APA title page, it has a participant subsection, a material subsection with 2 paragraphs, a procedure section with 2 paragraphs, and my proposed analysis subsection. I've also been keeping up with the references that I've been using. And other than removing that hyperlink, there we go, this reference section is also correct. And so now I'm ready to upload. I hope you found this video helpful, and I look forward to seeing your best effort on your methods drafts. See you online.